Okay, so I'm here to talk you through the steps to throw a vessel. We're going to go over wheel speed and the amount of water you should be using, and I'm going to try to narrate everything that I'm doing. And I'm going to start with about 1.5 pounds of clay right here, and I'm going to smash it onto the wheel. Right now I have the wheel going very slowly, and I'm using the heels of my hands to kind of give myself a little leg up by sort of pushing it into a centered mound, more or less. This will probably not be perfect when you're first starting, but as you get better at this, this really helps you when you're ready to get the wheel going. So we're going to start with centering, and we want the wheel speed to be fast but not full speed. So you don't want the wheel engine to be whining too high. You want it to be going pretty quick but not so fast that you feel out of control. And I think it's easiest at this point to just set your speed, get your foot off the pedal, and that way you're not distracted by accidentally slowing down or speeding up. For centering, we're going to use quite a bit of water. So I'm surrounding the clay with both my hands, and the pressure that I'm going to be using to cone up is going to be here. It's all in here. So I've got this part of my hand right against the wheel head. I've got my heels kind of pressing from the front. And when the clay starts to move, I'm just going to follow it up into a cone shape. Make sure that your elbows are on your knees so that you can leverage your power from there and not just be relying on the strength of your hands. Okay, now I'm going to push the cone down with the blade part of my hand. And I want to make sure that I can see the right side of my mound. My left hand is just kind of grasping the clay, but I'm not really pushing or anything. The push is coming from above, and as I get going down, I'm going to start pulling the heel of my hand to the front of the mound until it's pressing on the wheel head. Okay, and again, surrounding the clay with both hands, using the pressure from the heels of my hands and the blade of my hand. I'm pushing up. And pushing down again. As I get to the wheel head, I'm wrapping the heel of my hand around the mound. Even if the clay is centered at this point, I like to do this at least 3 times. Okay, so now I have a pretty centered mound of clay, and I'm going to open the well now. So I want to start with, I want the mound to be flat on top. The wheel speed is going to be the same, so you don't need to change anything about your wheel speed. You're going to use a moderate amount of water. So I like to use my thumbs. So I'm wrapping my hands around the clay and I'm pushing in. Again, make sure your elbows are on your knees. And created a well. Now I'm gonna create a floor. So I'm getting my left hand in there. I'm pressing with these 3 fingers against the middle of the well. I'm putting my other hand on top and I'm pulling my hand towards me. Make sure that the pressure that you're exerting is really along the bottom, and that you're not pushing into the bottom, you're trying to pull the clay towards you. You're not trying to push into the bottom of your pot. And now it's time to recenter. So I've got this kind of clay that's sort of flaring outwards. I like to take my sponge and just press it against the outside. My interior hand's not doing anything, and I'm kind of using my finger against the sponge so I can apply sort of equal pressure against the mound. I like to use a sponge too because it's damp, but it's not adding a bunch of water. And I want to create sort of a cone shape. And when I'm done, I'm just going to kind of gently press on the top of my mound, my cone, to make a nice even rim. Okay, so now it's time to raise the wall. Here you can slow down a tad, but you definitely don't want to be going slow. Okay, so I'm taking my middle finger and my index finger, getting it in there, and I'm pushing. I've got the tips of my fingers are resting against the floor of my pot, and I'm pushing out just with my fingertips to create a little bit of a bulge right here. And then I'm going to get my right fingertip underneath that. My right fingertip is just going to be lifting this bulge from underneath, and my inner fingers are pushing against the interior wall and lifting. I just want to keep nice steady pressure, not too much. Not too little. We don't need to raise all of the clay up at once. We're going to do a few passes here. And again, I'm going to take my sponge and I'm going to cone in a bit. So I'm just applying pressure from the outside. My interior hand is just sort of creating some support. Now I've got a nice cone shape again. Okay, I've got my fingers on the inside. I'm pushing that bulge out. You can see it popping out right there. And I'm getting my index finger underneath it. And I'm lifting. My fingers on the inside are pushing out. My outer finger isn't really pushing, it's just lifting. So maybe it's pushing up a bit, but it's not pushing in. Make sure your elbows are on your knees. And this time I'm just going to take my fingers for recentering and coning in, and I'm just gently pushing in. So as far as water usage through here, you all know I don't use very much water. But you should use the amount of water that feels comfortable while being aware that you don't want to use too much water because you don't want to make your pot all soggy. The soggier your pot is, the harder it is to raise the walls. I'm still kind of coning in here. Okay, one last time. Fingers down at the bottom, pushing out, creating that bulge, my index finger catching that, and gently lifting. Okay, I got a little swivel in here. That sometimes happens when the walls are getting a little thin and too much pressure is being applied. And I can just take my rib, press it against the outside, and sort of gently press against the rib from the inside and just sort of straighten that out. This also is doing double duty, clearing off any slip that I have on my pot. Okay, now shaping. So with shaping, I like to get my wheel a little bit slower. I'm gonna clean up this rim a little bit too. Put a little bit of water here. Kind of gently pressing. So this is just kind of a basic cylinder. There's not a lot of shaping that I really want to do with this. But if I did, I just can bring my hand on the inside, push out. Oh, and I'm realizing that my foot is on the pedal and it's gradually speeding up. So I'm going to take my foot off. I'm just going to do a little basic shaping here. So with shaping, you really do not want to add any water at this point. We want to keep the pot dry. If your fingers are dragging and it's bothering you, use a rib, use a tool, use a sponge that's been squeezed out of excess moisture. And I'm going to leave it at this point. There's not much more to do with this pot. And I hope that was helpful. And give it a try, and we'll talk about it in class.